I would like to invite on the stage the next team. So it's Avi Baruch from Previsico, Toby Drakesmith, and Heiko, Professor Heiko Balzter, and Asha Mistry from the Innovation Hub. Do you want to present something?
If that's possible, yeah, we can sit down.
Yes, he passed me a presentation. Can you pass me the stick?
Yeah, sure. I guess we could. Yeah.
Yes, you could.
While we get the presentation sorted, is the mic on? Yes, no. Okay. While we get the presentation sorted, I'm just going to tell you a bit about the background to this project. It was actually set up by my colleague Sarah Johnson, who cannot be here for this event today. So I'm very grateful for her to work with Previsico in getting this project off the ground. And it builds on many years, if not decades, of radar remote sensing experience here in the University of Leicester. We've actually been using radar for mapping Siberian forests, for mapping flood extent, for mapping the deformation of terrain, subsidence of land areas, and many other applications. And I'm really glad we got this off the ground, and we found a capable student to work on this quite complex topic. I think it was Steve, probably fair to say at the beginning.
Yeah, so my background is actually in computer science. I did my undergraduate degree at University of Leicester in computer science, and so the beginning first few months, as Heiko said, was quite a steep learning curve, getting to grips with all the geography side of things, the remote sensing, radar remote sensing. But yeah, since then it's been a very enjoyable few months. The last 9 months. So I started in January, and it's coming to an end now at the end of the year. But yeah, steep learning curve at the start, but I think now we're in a good place.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I've got a couple of slides just to quickly go through, and then I guess take a seat. So, hi everyone, I'm Avi. I'm the co-founder and chief operating officer of Prephysico. So we're a cloud forecasting company that spun out of Loughborough University about 3 years ago, following about 2 decades of R&D into kind of a live modeling technology that can predict surface water flooding. And while it kind of is a very good standalone service, there's a lot of work that we're doing to try and improve it. And a key part of that is using what data we can from social media, from space, from all sorts of different sources. And it is through that collaboration with Leicester University that we've been able to really accelerate the space of observation side. That's where coming in touch, and this is actually the first time we can Toby face to face. So it's very, very nice to actually be here finally. So moving next slide. Yeah. So the principle behind what we're doing is really looking at flood resilience. So we know that the impact of flooding is rising rapidly. Recent kind of report showed that about 1 in 5 properties in England are at risk of surface water flooding. And what we know from looking at some of the impacts of it is that the vast majority of losses are completely avoidable. Easiest example of that is the car park. You always move cars on high ground, but in Germany there's somewhere 200 deaths, which you'll know. I think if they had early warning systems helping coordinate with that response, they'd have been able to get there faster. So that's how we see it, and there's a lot of work we can do to reduce flood risk, and it's about getting prepared, having action plans, having resilience measures in place, and then having flood warnings. That's really where our technology comes in. Next slide. Yeah. And so we do get flood warnings here in the UK. We get them from the Environment Agency for major river systems. So there's been quite a few over the last couple of days. And that affects 2.4 million properties, so rivers and sea. But actually, surface water is the largest flood risk in the UK, also in England at least, and it affects 3 million properties. But for that, we just can't have the weather warnings, which are also really useful. But there's a bit of a gap because they don't really provide that sort of property level warning that people need to take action. And so what we do as a company, next slide. is we've been working with Cabinet Office from our university to develop a live modelling solution that could be able to provide property level warnings for flood. The next, how our technology works is we take live data from rainfall forecasts, model them through our modelling system to provide property level flood warnings showing depth and time of flood. And that currently doesn't include satellite because it's pre-event, but what we're then doing post-event is being able to calibrate it and improve it with that satellite imagery. So next slide. So this is kind of what our dashboard looks like. And you can see ahead of an event, we're able to then be able to provide predictive alerts that cover surface water flooding outside of where the Environment Agency are warning. So that's our forecast there in blue. And what we then, a really important part of what we do, because warnings, there's a lot of uncertainty around modelling, and you need to have real data on the ground to be able to properly calibrate it and improve it. And this is where we currently look at social media. So we have a forecast event, this was August 2020. Look at social media, get an event, we get some data from our customers on where they're being hit by flooding. But we're always looking for more, and actually what we know is that observation from space is a really, really good tool. So, you can probably skip the slide actually.
Okay.
And so how we work as a company is we set up a model, we run it, we inspect how it's performing, is our modeling system treating the environment in the right way, and we calibrate it and then set up live. And what we then do as soon as there's a flood event, we are then taking in all of that extra data to then keep inspecting its performance and keeping the service improving. And that's really, again, where this project comes in. Next slide. Probably next slide too, actually.
No.
And so where we see the opportunity for satellite imagery is especially using SAR. And so that's where Sarah Johnson started working with us and started taking SAR imagery from Sentinel data. And the good thing about SAR is it can penetrate clouds and can detect water. So she developed a few algorithms and a few systems in place to be able to detect both urban and open water bodies. So next slide. So you can see kind of this is what she started developing, and that allows us to be able to detect water across the landscape inside urban areas where it's flooding, and we can then use that to keep improving our service. Next slide. And that really comes down to then the work that Toby's been doing. So that the key is that SAR is really useful, but it's not perfect. And I think what we've been looking at is how can we improve the accuracy. So Toby, do you want to go through your slide?
Just quickly, using synthetic up to a radar, one of the characteristics of that is the oblique look angle. So it's not looking directly down to the earth; it's looking at an angle. That distance can be determined because if it's pointed straight down, it transmits energy, and all the energy can come back at the same time. It'd be impossible to map anything. So one of the problems with having an oblique look angle is that it can cause shadows. So in urban areas especially, but also with mountains, but what we're looking at is especially urban areas, with tall buildings, what that can do, or what can lead to, is areas of the Earth's surface that is not reached by the transmitted energy. And so that's something called shadow, radar shadow. So this image here is taken over Sheffield city centre, and the areas in white are projected areas of shadow, given a particular SAR image taken over that area. And so the idea of the project is to be able to output the areas within a SAR image that are likely to be shadow and not water, because water is also easily identifiable as water, because in a radar image the energy returns are very low, and you get exactly the same thing with shadow. So the issue is that shadow can be misclassified as water, and that impacts obviously the response to a flood event. So the idea of the project is to be able to identify areas of shadow within a SAR image and mark that as an area of low confidence and not water. Yeah.
So, okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, I think that we can open the fireside chat. Okay.
I think I would like to open the floor for questions. So do anyone have a question?
Thanks very much. Hi, so I want to ask a little bit about the classification problem between the shadows and the water area. So are you using machine learning normal classification algorithms, and how do you go about improving the accuracy of it?
Yeah, so identifying water is just a case of looking at surroundings and finding an area of low. So you have existing marks or areas of water bodies that you're able to identify. So that's one way of determining what's already, what should be there and what shouldn't be there. I don't know if you're using any machine learning or anything in your modeling, but as a whole, what you look at within an image is to find areas of low and pair that with a previous image to determine where the water is started to build up. But there's no machine learning or anything like that.
Oh, right. So, yeah, I was just wondering, so there is an energy difference between the water and the shadow, or there isn't an energy difference?
There isn't. So you might get a very small amount of energy return from water, but generally, because the water surface is flat, once it comes down, the energy hits the flat surface and just bounces away. So nothing is returned to the centre, which would be in the position.
So what's the current accuracy for it? Can I ask? Is that an answer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like a number for it. Still, it's in progress, and the idea is to continue testing different outputs. It's helpful to determine the accuracy, but hopefully,
That's just a really interesting point. Thank you very much. Sorry.
thank you.
Hi, just for data technical question as well. You were showing in the image areas of shadow. This is taking into account actually the understanding models.
Yes, so it's using a tool in SNAP processing toolbox, so Center One toolbox, and that takes the metadata from the image and calculates that.
It's a very interesting talk there. I just want to tell us a bit more about the water and the shadow. Obviously using radar to try and discern what's water and what's not. Can you couple that with other stuff like albedo measurements or spectrophotometry, things like that, to help discern what is water and what is in fact shadow?
I reckon you'll be.
Yeah, all right. I mean, in principle, the answer is yes, you could use other sources of imagery. In practice, the challenge is that, of course, quite often it's cloudy at the time when the flooding event happens, and it has to be near real-time data while the water is there. So in cities, I think the radar imagery that we've seen is actually the best source of data, because that is weather independent largely, and can see through clouds. So that's the reason for focusing on Sentinel-1, but of course that has limitations, because that only takes an image every 5 days or so, and therefore you can map the flood extent every 5 days, which is still the best you can do from free data at this point in time.
Are you using one radar wave band, or are you using multiple? Because I know they have different advantages depending on what the frequency is.
Yeah, Sentinel-1 has a C-band radar, so it's one particular wavelength and has 2 different polarizations. So effectively you get 2 different bands.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Christopher. I was just wondering what type of satellite you use, and is it possible to use a CubeSat?
Yeah, the satellite is the Sentinel-1 satellite that I was just mentioning, and this is one of the Copernicus satellites, so it provides free and open data through the Copernicus Open Access Hub. It is part of this European program, in which the UK is also continuing to be a partner at this point, and we hope that's very much going to be remaining in place. But in principle, you could build smaller constellations of radar sensors, and actually there are cases to be made for doing that, because then you get more frequent coverage, for example. So we have actually some years ago argued for a global radar constellation of small sensors for the purpose of deforestation monitoring in real time. But there are also other applications. There's a constellation from ISTAT, I guess, that could be mentioned, and Novasar S is another radar satellite. So the technology is getting smaller. I don't think it's quite there yet for CubeSats, but I think it will not be long perhaps before that happens.
Yeah, more slow.
I think this is a good opportunity to open the floor to the Teams audience. Is there any questions from Teams?
Got one, yeah. So Arjan has asked Previsico, how far along the commercialization journey are you? Are you making sales, generating income?
Yeah, so we are spun out about 3 years ago from Balzter and we grew very quickly. So we've made quite a few sales. Our largest market is in insurance, but we also sell directly to corporates and continuing our work with cabinet office, so government. So we're selling to a few different sectors. It's probably still relatively early days for us as a company, but we've got, again, real sales with real companies. So it's good, you know, better place than we were a couple of years ago. So again, our product is working well, and we're having especially over the last year or so, we've had a lot of growth in customers. And we closed a VC round in August, so that's allowed us to kind of accelerate that growth.
Okay, I have a question. And it is for you, Ali. What did it take to you to do that jump from university to being an entrepreneur?
It's a good question. For me, I didn't always dream of being an entrepreneur. I saw, you know, there's so many really good specialists in flood forecasting, flood modeling, early warning, and satellite observations. And, you know, being an academic, you go to study events, which are really inspiring to see all these really exciting approaches. I think the frustrating thing is that often there might be a research study that doesn't get discontinued. And I think what we had was a really, really good research project that I wanted to be used widely. And so the best way to do that was to spin out the university. So I always thought this is a bit of a project that, you know, there's so much exciting stuff on early warning and on improving kind of information you have to help avoid flood impacts, that this was the best way to go about it.
Wow, this is very inspiring. You started very small. How many employees are you now?
About 20 now.
Excellent. I have a question for Toby too. Well, you are working on a research degree, but this is industry-driven in this type of project. How does it work for you, working on this type of projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's been very interesting for me. As I said at the beginning, coming from a different background, this is something completely new to me. And I found the whole process really interesting, and working on something that you know, potentially could have a real impact on what Prephysico do. That is quite a motivating factor for me, and it provides a lot of relevance to the work I'm doing.
Thank you.
Another question at the back.
Where was that hand?
Just there. Hello. I understand that to analyse using weather balloons, why is it not the best alternative to use a weather balloon instead of a satellite?
For technology we are using synthetic aperture radar. That's one particular type of technology that actually uses the Doppler effect for improving the spatial resolution of the images we get. And that relies on the stable motion of the sensor. So that's the main reason for not using a balloon, which you cannot control as well and which doesn't move at the same speed in the same direction all the time. There are other high altitude platforms now, I think, being developed for radar sensors, but you need a stable platform that moves at a defined path. So the Toby effect is basically when you're at the train station, the sound of the train approaching you sounds different from when the train leaves the station and drives away from you. And that basically is because the motion of the object making noise compresses or expands the sound waves in that case, in the case of the train. And with the microwaves from the satellite sensors, basically the same effect only for microwaves.
Okay, thank you.
This question for Avi. What do you feel was your first step towards entrepreneurship, and when do you think that sort of happened and implemented?
So there's actually a very fortunate, so there's a program called the Heiko program, which Mark Bennett in the back, in his previous life, he was head of commercialization at Dr University. So he encouraged me to apply for it. And it was probably the best 3-month job I've ever had, because they gave you a £20,000 grant to fly anywhere you wanted to talk to whoever you wanted to about their problems around flooding. So I was able to just have a completely fully funded world tour and talk to a lot of people who are affected by flooding. And so it was, I initially spoke to a lot of people in the humanitarian sector, but I realized sort of after, towards the end of that, the next stage was then building a business model. Quickly realized that actually to really have more of a sustainable business, you needed customers who could probably give you regular payments, which humanitarian projects often that'll be a kind of one-off. So that's where we felt that the best way to really help the project succeed was to turn into a real business. So that was my journey. So thank you also to Innovate UK for funding that. So
When did that take place? During your undergraduate degree?
That was just after my PhD. So I finished my PhD in the summer of 2018, and that's also when I started the Heiko journey. I highly recommend it. I think the funding is still out there. Very obviously, the last cohort they struggled because of the pandemic, but hopefully future ones will be able to do it. It was a lot of fun and really, really powerful experience.
Thank you.
I'm cycling entrepreneurship cluster. So have you thought of using machine learning and what is CubeSat to improve your forecast?
It's a really interesting question on machine learning because there's a lot of different ways it can be applied. So there's specifically on the satellite image processing side, there's I think a lot of published research on how it can really help. So that's not one area. On improving our forecast, there's a lot of other things to consider because, especially on surface water flooding, these are the floods that come and go really quickly, that we often don't have data for, and they're kind of very erratic events, often kind of localized. So I think there's a lot of red herrings around the use of machine learning in predicting flash floods like that. And you need to be really careful, otherwise you're going to be generating some garbage. So it's one where for kind of specific purposes in satellite imagery, it works. For specific forms around looking at, for example, river gauges, it works. Around using satellite imagery to improve our forecasting, I think you can do it without machine learning. But that can change.
My name is Katie. Just a quick question. In your forecast, have you found whether the forecasts improve from city to city or country to country? Is there a variation in terms of the accuracy of the forecasts based on the geographic location?
Yes, definitely. Especially country to country. So one of the largest drivers of uncertainty is the rainfall forecast. So we're live across the whole of the UK, but we've also been running a project in Kenya. The quality of the rainfall forecast in Kenya is nowhere near as good as it is here. Also then seasonality matters a lot. So if you look at the weather forecast, it's a bit more stable. in the summer, it's a lot more erratic. So that massively affects it. Then obviously the city, different cities are more predictable in terms of how they respond. Some catchments are harder to model than others. So yeah, performance, this is when everyone asks about performance, whether it's a satellite imagery or our forecasting, there's 1,000 answers to that one question because it depends on so many things on the geography and the season and everything.
So based on that, do you then work with local meteorological services or do you get data from them?
Yeah, so we work with IBM Weather Company, who are the largest global weather forecasting company, and we've been working with the Met Office. So there's a lot of really exciting different sources of weather data we use.
You're almost out of time, so I'm going to wrap up the questions there and panelists today for their presentation and all the questions from the audience. Thank you.